Hey there, welcome to the Drawing Codex. In this video, what I want to do is share with you how you can create different varieties of faces with different features and different proportions using the Loomis method. This is something that Andrew Loomis actually goes over quite a bit in the book. Unfortunately, a lot of people don't read the book, so what I want to do is just, again, give you some advice and tips for how you can actually do that, especially when you're working in a more stylistic comic booky style, because that is certainly something that often doesn't get talked about when people are drawing with the Loomis method. But in my experience, this is something that is quite easy to do, and it is where we sort of get past that idea of drawing the blocky, silly guy, and we start drawing fun, cool stuff and playing with proportions and applying style to that underlying structure. Anyway, let me share with you my thoughts and show you how I would do this. Let's get started. Alright, welcome to the Drawing Codex. Let's jump in and get started. What we're going to do is explore how we would use something like the Loomis method, both to create slightly cartoonier art and also how to do the fun things that this allows us to do, which is create character, create different faces, different features, and apply this basic blocky system that we often see to things which, in my opinion, are a lot more fun. Now, I'm going to be doing some of this in a sketchbook. I've got a matte Blackwing. This is in a Strathmore 400 series sketch journal. Again, good paper for sketching. Not so much for doing finished pages or anything like that, but it should be fine for our purposes here. And I've got a little skull that we can use to describe and explore some basic concepts of head construction. Okay, so again, this is Drawing the Head and Hands by Andrew Loomis. It's a book I recommend to everyone who's interested in drawing faces and people, basically. And this is the page where we look at what people typically call the Loomis method. And this is how really we break down the idea of blocking in the face. You can see again the same idea we would sort of have here. If we've got our little sort of skull. And what we're trying to do here is figure out how do we sort of block in and get the primary forms, which are often the most important forms there. How do we block those in and draw them from different angles? And the Loomis method gives us a nice system that he kind of figured out and used that helps us get on the way. Now, he sort of talked often a lot about this, creating sort of different features and different types of characters using exactly the same method. And I think this is often where people get a little bit sort of disillusioned with this, is you just sort of watch one YouTube video that someone created, and often they're actually just drawing from reference in a way that I really don't think you need to. This is a much better sort of system for drawing from your imagination, in my experience. And so I think often what happens is people kind of don't actually read the book, which again is something I recommend in my, the truth about the Loomis method is read the book. You'll find it's a lot more creative, a lot more interesting, and it explains this stuff in really, really, really good detail. There's a huge sort of exploration of, again, different sort of faces and proportions and sort of how to do that. And again, goes into that in quite a lot of detail. He also has a lot of sort of examples of how he, creates, much more sort of cartoony looking sort of drawings using the same methods. So it's important to understand that, that Loomis's teachings are quite broad, and, I really recommend buying the book. But, what I want to do is just sort of describe the basic concept here and see if we can sort of explore it with some of those different proportions, because again, that's often what people are sort of worrying about, right? It's often about what people are like, oh, I don't want to do the Loomis method because it's just about drawing this boring, blocky Caucasian guy, right? Whereas it can really be used for anything. So the basic idea here, just to go over it, so we're sort of thinking about the proportions, is that we sort of we create dimensionality around a sphere. Right, so we sort of make it three-dimensional, and then we sort of pick a point and draw a line down, which is going to represent the center of the face. We then create three major proportional markers, one for the forehead, and the forehead kind of starts just a little bit below the top of that sphere. And that becomes kind of what we consider the brow ridge to the hairline proportion. And then we kind of just mirror that down a few times, right? One to get to the nose, right? Again, sort of nose going to be about here. And then we sort of repeat that proportion again, and that's going to sort of give us the chin. And this is the general sort of Loomis proportion. So what we're going to have then is a situation where we've got, again, I've got that brow ridge. We then sort of carve a little bit off the side, right, as he sort of nicely sort of illustrates, right? We sort of carve off a little bit out of the side. We then got the chin, and what we often have is then our ability to create, again, so we sort of create a line down the side. Right, often you find, again, the mouth is now going to sort of appear somewhere around the bottom of that sphere from a proportional marker. And you're going to have the jaw sort of there, right? And this allows us to create a basic sort of set of proportions that we can then drop. See, again, what I normally do is draw the nose a little bit sort of smaller from a stylistic standpoint, but from a realistic standpoint, right, you'd probably put the nose there and the mouth would go there. And again, the hair sort of goes on top depending on hairstyle. So that's the basic sort of idea. And I think that the problem is we practice this for control, right? This will, you know, give you a really good sort of baseline that you can use to kind of understand the proportion and make sure that, like, look, if you can't draw this, it's probably because you're missing some basic drawing concepts, right? So if you're finding it hard to just do the basic proportional sort of system here that he's kind of talking about, right, and just kind of breaking these things down into simple proportions, right? So if this is sort of becoming challenging for you, then let's put that in a better spot. So if this thing is challenging, it's probably a good indication that you need to work on your general drawing a little bit more, or you just need to study the basic proportion. Now, I think the danger comes as people get you get good at this, and then you kind of think, okay, what else do I do? And I think, you know, the trap that I fell into, and I've seen a lot of other people fall into, is you just kind of try and draw this more and more and more. Now, if you want to focus on a lot of the secondary form concepts, and secondary forms just mean like the subtle details of the nose, again, the specific, you know, way that the lips move, right? A lot of those subtle, right? Like exactly what happens under the chin, right? How does the chin sort of blend into the neck? You would have all the little details of a realistic ear, etc., etc. So that would be a secondary form. Tertiary or third degree forms would be like the pores in the skin, the wrinkles around the eyes, etc. What we're doing here is just blocking in primary form. And the other thing that we're trying to do is practice control. So keep it in mind, right? That's kind of what we're doing, and that's what you're trying to get good at when you practice the primary thing, in my opinion. Now, what we want to do is, if you're using your sort of different faces or you're sort of stylizing this, is that you can kind of modify this basic, right, this basic proportional sort of set to suit yourself. So once you've mastered this, this will kind of weed out a lot of the basic stuff that you're probably not doing right. Things that a lot of people don't do right, I actually describe in a free workshop that I've got that you can check out, which goes over the, you know, top 5 head mistakes that most people make when they're sort of trying to draw these. So that might be something that you can sort of look at. It's free. The link is in the description. I recommend you check it out. But there's a lot of things that people tend to get wrong, right? So you can sort of check that out. But, you know, one would be that, you know, we're meant to draw a straight line here for proportion, but often people sort of draw a little curved line, right? And just little things like that. There'll be things that you're doing where, you know, you're not really sort of getting the proportional mirroring, right? So you're not really putting in those markers to define, like, sort of where does this eye go and where does this eye go, right? We're not thinking about, again, you know, just actually measuring it. A lot of people kind of measure roughly, right? So there's a lot of, like, it sounds silly, but there's a lot of those little mistakes. And often good drawing is just about doing like 10 really basic, easy things every time correctly. It's not always about this massive sort of complicated thing. It's often that if you just miss one or two of these little things, if you get a few proportional markers off, the whole thing looks like garbage, right? That's just the nature of the beast. You have to kind of learn to do all of those things and do them all right. So anyway, the basic one will teach you that, right? It'll kind of teach you what you need to know. But again, it's not what you should sort of spend the majority of your time on. So what we can do next is look at how we modify this, right? And again, the way I'm just going to sort of show you the way that I modify it and use some of the stylistic quirks that sort of I have. So typically I'm elongating the chin, right? So I've still got, again, the brow ridge, right? I've still got the kind of hair marker there, right? I'm still kind of cutting off a little bit of the side, and I've still got kind of a nose. But typically what I'm doing is I'm compressing this this middle proportion, the nose proportion, right? So my nose is going to be a little bit sort of smaller relative to everything else. And I'm also going to sort of make the eyes a lot bigger from a proportional standpoint. And then I'm going to sort of leave quite a large amount of room here for the sort of mouth to be. And again, there's what you'll find is a lot of people make similar stylistic choices, and there's probably various reasons why, you know, that kind of happens. But again, that is sort of the stylistic change that I'm making to that proportion. Now the trick is I'm not just kind of willy-nilly making that change, you know, and I will modify that based on, you know, the particular character that I'm drawing. But the point there is I know those changes that I'm making, so I'm being just as consistent in the way that I apply this change as to, you know, the way I'm drawing this. But that really is all we do. You just sort of define your own proportional markers, right? So I've got 1, 2, 3, and that's what really will give you style, right? That's what will both allow you to exaggerate the faces and draw different faces, but also adjust your own style. And the trick is, I just need to be consistent with this. And if I'm relatively consistent with the fact that, oh, in general, I compress the top 2 proportions and I sort of elongate that 3rd proportion, doesn't matter what type of character I'm drawing, you know, male, female, big, small, whatever, then it'll look consistent. So controlling is the key here. Control it all. All right, so let's look at how we actually do the fun stuff. Hopefully that makes sense. Again, let me know in the comments if it doesn't, if you're still like, I don't know what you're talking about, man. Let me know. Let's sharpen this just a bit, not too much. All right, so let's take a couple of sort of basic sort of different proportional concepts that we could do. And I'm just going to do them roughly so you can kind of see how this functions. But, you know, we could sort of look at a long face. And that would sort of be similar to, again, the type of face that I was sort of drawing there, right? Because that sort of stylistic choice that I'm making does sort of elongate the face a little bit, right? So I'm still doing this, right? Got my little sort of nose here. I'm just kind of elongating this bit here. Right? But again, if I wanted to stylistically have a long face, I probably would want to make it even longer, right? So, you know, it's going to be sort of super long. And all I'm doing there is just increasing this little proportion there. Right? So we'd still have, again, let's give this guy a really pointy nose for some reason. So again, you can see there I've got the basic proportions there that I need, so I can just kind of rough in those features from a cartoony sort of standpoint. But again, what I would often do if I need some of that, if I need some sort of structure there, is I put in a big sort of circle that gives me a good indication of where that sort of eye should be, and that's kind of all I need. Again, the eyebrow, because I'm working in an iconic stylistic sense, doesn't need to be sort of structural, right? But again, here I've got, and again, we can sort of block in the ear, right? But then just a matter of adding as much detail or however you want to stylize the ear. So again, that would be a long sort of face there. And mostly what I've done is just, as I said before, I've just increased this, right? So we're just increasing this proportion, right? And that's kind of the main thing that we're doing. Again, and you know, I'd recommend, you know, you just like, if you're into a particular artist or a particular art style or something, just really look at it and break down the style. Like, you know, do they tend to compress one thing? Do they tend to compress another thing? What's the general sort of style? You know, and you'll be able to kind of, you know, figure these things out. Again, I feel like often people with long faces have, we sort of give a long neck to kind of help sell that idea. Anyway, so that's how we would do it. All I'm doing is just increasing this proportion, right? And again, I'm sort of making sure not to, you know, to kind of keep the width of that face pretty narrow as well. Now, if we wanted to do like a wide one, right, as an example, again, I'm going to use the same block-in method, right? Let's create dimensionality within a sphere. I'm just going to lean over and double check that because I know from memory that often ends badly, right? So again, I've got the same proportion. And again, I'm still gonna sort of chop some off there, right? I've still got my first proportion, so the hairline, and then I've got the brow, and then I've got the nose. Except again, as you kind of see, right, I'm normally gonna make the nose kind of even smaller. And then what we're gonna do is, as I was doing before, we're gonna block in this. But what we're gonna do here is just sort of increase the width of that cheek a little bit, right, and sort of kick it out. So, you know, it's almost like here that the skull stays the same, right? The skull here is going to stay the same. Oh, let's get that where we can see it. Sorry, right? So the skull here is going to see the same. It's mostly that the jaw is gonna move out, right? So again, I can sort of let's block in some features, and we'll just see if we can block in the basic sort of primary form. Right, so this is kind of how I'd sort of create a slightly kind of wider sort of face. And again, we could really kind of play with it, right, and really kind of kick it out. Right, give this a super wide sort of look. Let's block in that, and again, we'll try and block things in a little bit more from a structural standpoint, so you can see how I would normally do it. Right, and then again, we're going to have the mouth sort of somewhere here, right? So, and again, you would imagine from a structural standpoint, normally someone with a giant jaw like that is going to be a sort of a muscly character with a big, right, big neck. So again, the neck is a major part of character, right? It really changes everything. And again, all we kind of do is go in there and add features. Let's sort of give him, again, so I'm working very much within iconography here, just sort of drawing, you know, eyebrows like, you know, big sort of marks. I'm not thinking about the form. Again, create some sort of bottom lines for that eye. Create some of these kind of lines which sort of age the character a bit. Again, you could put a few there. Right, put some lines up here to kind of age the character even more. Right. Draw the ear. Boom. Boom. Etc. Right. And again, so we're just using exactly the same idea. I'm just adjusting a few things. Now, I'm being careful, to try and not drastically change the size of the eyes or those kind of things. But again, you could if you wanted someone with really big eyes or whatever. That might work as well. And again, let's do a sort of a check of this. Make sure the proportion actually makes sort of sense when we're viewing it from the side. Again, it's always looking at it from an angle there makes it sort of tricky to get that proportion accurate. So again, you can have you can have that sort of idea, like tall, wide, whatever, sort of more, sort of like normal sort of character. Again, we could do a female character. We can do a fantasy sort of character. Let's do a female character when we use a similar sort of set of proportional markers. 1, 2, right, and we'll still make her, the bottom bit quite large, quite significant. So we're going to have a nose. Right, we're going to have some eyes there. We're going to have some sort of cheekbone. So again, I'm just kind of drawing this line based on sort of character, right? I'm not doing heaps of form or anything like that. It's again, it's a mix of things. So here got an ear. And we're going to have a slightly thinner neck, right? And here we go. So we're just going to put in, make sure I'm over here. Same thing. I'm going to make the eyelashes feel a little bit kind of bigger. We increase the darkness there a little bit. And again, you could sort of play around with, maybe increasing the size or the strength of that kind of upper lip a bit. Too much structure, but yeah, so, and again, we'll decrease the size and the shape of that. And obviously, if we had some other features that are going to help us, right? That'll kind of help us, give us some structure there. But again, it's often a matter of just applying the iconic sort of features here. So you can see, again, still quite a big jaw, right? Which again might not be what you want stylistically for a highly feminized character, but again, that's kind of how that would work. As I always say, it's easy to apply this as well to fantasy characters, which is something I've sort of done sort of demonstrations of in the past, but let's just do a quick one for fun, and then I think we'll be sort of done. So in this case, again, creating that same proportional marker. Right here we got, again, so we're going to have a nose, eyes, right, boom, and should have created that center line there. But in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a mound that's a lot bigger along that center line because I want to draw sort of an orc character or something like that. So again, I'm going to keep this fairly stylized, right? Like a little bit sort of cartoony. Because again, I can draw in different styles. They're all cartoony relative to someone who's drawing realistically. But let's put in an ear. But you know, this is probably, you know, on the more cartoony end of how I would normally draw. So again, I've got center line, right? I've got center line for the nose, right? Center line here, center line here. That's helping me again mirror, right? So mirroring these. That's something that I'm just visualizing. So again, the more you practice, right, the more you know, want to draw all these things, create structure for them, right? The better that will go. But obviously, again, I'm sort of showing you how I would sort of actually apply it, as opposed to kind of, you know, just doing a basic sort of drawing demo here. And we'll probably do some demos in the future, really talking about, you know, how to practice this, you know, how to get in there and you know, do the boring blocky guy and really get all the proportions accurate. But you can also just buy the book. You know, it's you know, it's a little bit old. It's a little bit hard to read if you're, you know, not into that. If you're not into parsing the verbiage from the 1940s, then it's going to be a little bit sort of painful, because again, it was written a long time ago. But again, there's other books that go over similar ideas. What I'm trying to do here is just inspire you to kind of say, hey, you know, drawing this stuff is really fun. You know, for me, using the Loomis method in this way has allowed me to sort of free me up to be able to design characters and modify them. So you can see, you know, all these characters feel like they're from a similar kind of world. They all have iconically similar features. But I'm utilizing the Loomis method, and I'm also, again, drawing different types of characters. You can see these are different. And it would be pretty easy to, you know, block these in, you know, and keep them consistent from page to page, panel to panel, illustration to illustration, right? That's often one of the frustrating things that people deal with. How do we keep the characters consistent? Again, the Loomis method will help you a lot. So anyway, that's a quick demo. That's all I've got for now. Let me know in the comments if this was helpful, if you'd like more of these, if you want the technical, if you want me to sort of break down exactly how you do all the technical stuff a little bit more. We could maybe do some exercises for that. But hopefully this inspires you just to get a little bit excited about the possibilities of using this. And yes, you can use it for drawing, you know, fun, cartoony stuff. That's how I use it. I still think, you know, even if you look at a lot of how to draw manga books or how to draw books in general, they often have that same, you know, like, let's start with a sphere and kind of block it in, right? I think the Loomis method is just a more sophisticated version of that, and it allows more flexibility and allows you to, again, adjust your style a little bit if you need. Anyway, that's all I've got. Thanks for hanging out. Thanks for watching. Catch you around. Happy drawing.